In 1898, as steamships routinely vanished into North Atlantic fog, the world's major shipping lines signed an extraordinary agreement. They would carve invisible lanes across the ocean, separating eastbound and westbound traffic into organized corridors to prevent catastrophic collisions. The system worked. Vessels that had previously wandered freely across 3,000 nautical miles of open water now followed prescribed paths, adjusted seasonally for ice and current. One deviation from the assigned lane meant potential disaster. The agreement held for decades. For over a century since, crossing the Atlantic has meant following a line someone else drew for you. Ships did it, and today, roughly 2,000 flights per day still funnel through narrow corridors of sky that shift position every 12 hours based on a river of wind most passengers never think about. But in March 2019, a constellation of 66 satellites quietly activated a surveillance system called Space-Based ADS-B. And for the first time in 60 years, air traffic controllers could actually see every aircraft over the open ocean in almost real time. The technology doesn't just improve the old system, it makes the old system unnecessary. Despite this capability being operational for over 6 years now, the invisible highway still exists. Airlines still follow it. Controllers still publish new tracks twice daily. So, if satellites solve the problem, why is the highway getting more dangerous, not less? To understand why thousands of flights a day still queue into narrow corridors over the Atlantic, you need to understand a single, devastating limitation that defined oceanic aviation for decades. Radar cannot see past approximately 200 miles offshore. Beyond that, aircraft vanish from controllers' screens entirely. This isn't a minor technical gap. The North Atlantic is the busiest oceanic airspace on Earth, handling roughly 580,000 flights per year between Europe and North America. At peak summer traffic, controllers at Shanwick Oceanic Control in Prestwick, Scotland, and Gander Oceanic Control in Newfoundland, Canada, are responsible for separating aircraft across millions of square miles of open water without ever seeing them. The physics have been unforgiving. Without radar, controllers relied on position reports from pilots every few minutes. To ensure no two aircraft collided in this blind zone, separation standards exceeded the industry norm. These massive buffers meant the sky could only hold so many aircraft at any given altitude. And here's where the jet stream enters the equation. The jet stream, a narrow band of high-altitude wind blowing west to east at speeds sometimes exceeding 200 miles per hour, represents the single most powerful economic force in transatlantic aviation. An eastbound flight riding the jet stream from New York to London can shave 90 minutes off its journey. A westbound flight, hitting it head-on, can burn thousands of additional dollars in fuel. So, the system adapted. Beginning in 1965, aviation authorities began publishing the North Atlantic Organized Track System, a daily set of virtual highways drawn through the sky to thread as many aircraft as possible through the most favorable winds. Eastbound tracks are published for overnight crossings, entering the system between 0100 and 0800 UTC. Westbound tracks are published for daytime returns, crossing the 30 degrees west boundary between 1130 and 1900 UTC. Every 12 hours, the tracks are redrawn based on fresh jet stream data. The system has been elegant. Aircraft that couldn't be seen were at least predictable. Controllers knew exactly where each flight would be and when. Airlines saved millions by riding tailwinds. The trade-off was freedom. Every aircraft followed the same narrow corridors, stacked at flight levels between FL 340 and FL 400, whether the pilot wanted to or not. The constraint wasn't the wind, it was the darkness, and by darkness I mean informational darkness, the complete inability to know precisely where an aircraft was in real time over the ocean. Gander Oceanic Control took the western half of the Atlantic, Shanwick took the eastern half. Their boundary sat at 30 degrees west longitude, roughly the midpoint of the crossing. Between them, they managed one of the most complex airspace operations on Earth using procedural control, a method essentially unchanged since the 1960s. Pilots would report their position by voice over HF radio, a technology notorious for poor reception, static, and garbled transmissions. Controllers would plot these positions on paper strips or early computer systems, mentally projecting where each aircraft would be 10 or 15 minutes from now. Conflicts were resolved through altitude changes and time-based separation. Aircraft that could get the best track rode favorable winds and saved fuel. Aircraft that couldn't were pushed to less efficient altitudes or less favorable routes. The result was a competitive lottery. British Airways might get Track Alpha at FL 380 with a 180-knot tailwind. United, they might be stuck on Track Charlie at FL 340 with a 120-knot tailwind. Same ocean, same night, dramatically different economics. The system worked, but it worked the way a traffic light works on a highway designed for bicycles. It prevented collisions, but imposed enormous artificial constraints on capacity and efficiency. Then, on March 27, 2019, everything changed. Ariane, a surveillance technology company, activated its space-based ADS-B system, hosted on the Iridium Next constellation of 66 low Earth orbit satellites. For the first time in aviation history, controllers at Gander and Shanwick could see every equipped aircraft over the North Atlantic in real time. Not every 10 minutes, not through garbled HF radio reports, continuously, every few seconds. The implications were immediate and profound. Separation standards that have been set for a blind environment could finally be reduced. Lateral separation dropped. Longitudinal separation shrank. This single change increased effective airspace capacity and, according to NATS, resulted in fuel savings of 19 million Great British pounds annually. But the real prize wasn't just fitting more planes onto the same tracks, it was eliminating the tracks entirely. In March 22nd, NATS and NAV Canada took a dramatic step. They abolished organized tracks below flight level 330. Aircraft cruising above 25,000 feet could now fly their own optimized routes, free from the invisible highway. The industry calls this free route airspace. The results validated the concept. In the first 3 months after Ariane's implementation, 31,700 flights flew at optimized speeds and altitudes, saving significant fuel per crossing. Annual savings reached approximately 45,000 tons of CO2 and £19 million in fuel costs across the system. Flight Radar 24 integrated Ariane satellite data with its own network of terrestrial receivers in February 2026, closing the last blind spots in global flight tracking. The ocean was no longer dark. The significance of space-based ADS-B isn't really about fuel savings, and it isn't about emissions reduction. It's about what happens when you dismantle a 60-year-old system that every pilot in the world was trained to use. You see, the organized track system wasn't just a routing structure, it was a mental model. Pilots understood how oceanic crossings worked because the process hadn't fundamentally changed since the 1960s. You received your oceanic clearance by voice, you read it back, you confirmed your track, your flight level, your Mach number. The ritual was familiar, and it was safe. In late 2024, authorities began replacing these voice clearances with automated data link messages sent through CPDLC, Controller Pilot Data Link Communications. The intention was efficiency. The result? Chaos. The North Atlantic Central Monitoring Agency reported 475 lateral navigation errors in the Gander region in 2025, a staggering 71% increase over the previous year. Pilots were misinterpreting automated messages, wrongly believing that a system acknowledgement meant their requested altitude and speed had been approved. Crews were entering incorrect data into flight computers. Aircraft were drifting off their assigned routes without anyone immediately noticing. Then came the near miss that crystallized the danger. In June 2025, approximately 160 nautical miles northeast of Gander, A controller inadvertently issued a data link clearance to a United Airlines Boeing 777 to climb to flight level 360. The problem was a FedEx Boeing 777 that was already occupying flight level 350, directly in the United jet's path. The controller caught the error and issued a voice command to stop the climb, but the United aircraft had already begun ascending. The crew received a TCAS alert, the last resort collision avoidance system, and immediately descended. Vertical separation shrank to just 500 feet, half the required minimum. Two wide-body jets, carrying hundreds of souls between them, avoided catastrophe by seconds. By May 2025, Gander was forced to temporarily revert to VHF voice communications for all route amendments, essentially admitting that the automated future had arrived faster than the humans operating it could adapt. This seems irrational. The technology works, the satellites can see every aircraft. The separation standards have been safely reduced, the fuel savings are real, the environmental benefits measurable, yet the transition is producing more danger, not less. But the paradox resolves when you understand that the organized track system was never just about navigation, it was about predictability. When 2,000 aircraft cross the same ocean every night on the same handful of tracks, everyone knows the rules. Pilots know what to expect, controllers know where to look. The system's rigidity was its safety mechanism. Free routing eliminates that predictability. Every aircraft flying its own unique curve means 2,000 individual trajectories instead of 6 or 8 organized tracks. Controllers must now manage a fundamentally different kind of complexity, not choreography along lanes, but conflict detection across an open field. AI-assisted algorithms and real-time satellite surveillance could make this theoretically possible in the future, but the human element, pilots interpreting new message formats, controllers adapting to new workflows, that remains the bottleneck. And the environment itself is becoming less cooperative. Research from the University of Reading has documented that severe clear air turbulence over the North Atlantic has increased by 55% since 1979. The jet stream that makes the track system so economically valuable is getting more volatile and less predictable as the climate warms. The invisible highway is getting bumpier precisely as the technology to abandon it arrives. In March 2025, ICAO took another step that signaled where this is all heading. It officially deleted the Blue Spruce routes, historic backup corridors through Greenland and Iceland that had served as lifelines for aircraft with limited navigation equipment since the early days of transatlantic flying. These routes were relics of an era when crossing the Atlantic meant hopping between landmasses, keeping something solid within range in case of engine failure. Their deletion was quiet but symbolically enormous. It means that the North Atlantic is no longer designed to accommodate aircraft that cannot navigate precisely. Every plane crossing that ocean must now carry advanced GPS and surveillance equipment. The era of procedural navigation, of position reports and paper strips and HF radio is functionally over. The organized track system still exists, still published twice daily, still shifting with the jet stream, but the trajectory is unmistakable. NATS and NAV Canada have stated their intention to eventually dissolve the entire structure, even at peak traffic levels. The invisible highway, the one that has funneled millions of flights across the same narrow corridor for 6 decades, is being dismantled piece by piece. When that last organized track is eventually deleted from the daily publication, it'll close a chapter that began not with jet engines or satellites, but with steamships in fog. More than 2,000 flights will still cross the Atlantic every day. They will still chase the jet stream eastbound and dodge it westbound. They will still depart from the same airports and land at the same destinations. But each aircraft will fly its own invisible path, optimized by algorithms, tracked by satellites, separated by systems that didn't exist a decade ago. The question isn't whether the invisible highway will disappear, it's already disappearing. The question is whether the rest of aviation, the pilots, the controllers, the procedures written for a world that no longer exists, is really keeping up. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?